Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. It's their insightful reflection on their massive 11-volume work, The Story of Civilization. So, we're going to be extracting some serious wisdom here.
Oh, yeah. They cover a vast amount of historical ground in this book. I mean, from ancient civilizations to the modern world, and they do it with incredible clarity and depth.
Right off the bat, they acknowledge the challenge of studying history. I mean, our knowledge of the past is always incomplete, potentially biased, subject to interpretation. So how can we even learn from history if it's so inherently uncertain?
Well, the Durants argue that despite these limitations, history reveals patterns and recurring themes that can offer us valuable insights. You can think of it like weather forecasting. We can't predict the exact temperature or wind speed a year from now. But we can use historical data to understand broader climate patterns and trends.
So what are some of the key patterns and trends that the Durants identify in the lessons of history? I know they emphasize the powerful influence of geography.
Well, absolutely. Just imagine your life. If you lived in the middle of the Sahara Desert versus fertile river valley, that's the kind of impact geography has had on the rise and fall of civilizations. Access to water, natural resources, trade routes have shaped human history in profound ways.
And while technology has allowed us to overcome some geographic limitations, we're still ultimately dependent on the natural world. The Durants use those powerful images, like a tornado wiping out a city in an hour, or an iceberg sinking a luxury liner, to remind us that nature still holds sway.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of nature, they delve into human nature as well. They argue that our biology drives much of history, with competition and selection as powerful forces.
It's almost like a Darwinian struggle playing out on a societal scale. But wait, if we're just slaves to our biology, are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes?
Well, the Durants don't believe in simple biological determinism. They acknowledge the complexity of human behavior, but they see these primal urges as something we must understand and manage, not deny. They point to the concept of natural inequality as an example. They argue that civilization, while it has advanced in many ways, tends to exacerbate these natural differences, rather than erase them.
That raises interesting questions about social justice and equality. And the Durants don't shy away from challenging commonly held views, especially those around race.
That's right. During their time, racist theories were very popular, particularly the concept of Aryan supremacy. But the Durants dismantle those ideas by pointing to the enduring civilizations of China and India, built by non-white peoples, and emphasize that judging one civilization as superior, without considering factors like climate and geography, is foolish.
So they're pushing back against the idea that any one race or culture is inherently superior. It seems like a very progressive stance for their time.
It is, and they argue that racial prejudice often stems from differences in acquired culture, not from any inherent biological inferiority. Education, they argue, is the key to bridging those cultural divides.
Okay, so we've got this unpredictable dance between geography, human nature, and culture playing out throughout history. Where does morality fit into all of this?
Well, the Durants trace this fascinating cyclical interplay of Puritanism and paganism throughout history. They define Puritanism as a strict moral code that emphasizes self-control and duty, while paganism represents a more relaxed, pleasure-seeking approach to life.
It's that classic tension between restraint and indulgence. I can see how those forces might ebb and flow over time.
Exactly. And they observe that periods of moral laxity often follow times of war and upheaval, drawing parallels between ancient Rome and the modern world. After experiencing extreme hardship and chaos, societies often swing towards a desire for release and self-gratification.
It makes you wonder if we're hardwired for that kind of cyclical moral response. Do you think that pattern holds true in our modern world?
It's a question worth pondering. Think about the Roaring '20s after World War I, or the cultural shifts in the '60s and '70s. There seems to be a historical pattern there.
And it brings us back to that question of human nature. Do we face the same basic moral struggles, even if our technology and social structures have evolved?
Durants believe we do. They suggest that human nature, with all its complexities and contradictions, remains relatively constant throughout history.
So if we're prone to these moral swings, what role has religion played historically?
The Durants make an interesting distinction. Religion, while not inherently tied to morality, has been a powerful force for social order throughout history.
That's a surprising distinction. They're saying religion isn't necessarily about being good, but about providing a framework for social cohesion.
Exactly. Religion offers comfort, hope, and meaning. Particularly for those who are struggling in life, this makes it incredibly resilient, even in the face of challenges from reason and science.
With the world feeling pretty chaotic right now. Who knows? Maybe we're due for a religious revival. Food for thought, for sure. But speaking of powerful forces shaping history, let's talk about economics.
Sure. The Durants place economics at the center of the historical stage, arguing that it often drives political, social, and even cultural changes. It's about resources, wealth, and who controls what. And they see a cyclical pattern here as well, a constant push and pull between the concentration and redistribution of wealth.
That makes sense. Economic inequality has been a driving force behind so many revolutions and social movements. Throughout history, they probably discuss how those cycles played out in ancient civilizations, right?
They do. They use ancient Athens and the Roman Empire as examples. In both cases, wealth initially concentrated in the hands of a few, leading to inequality and social unrest. This paved the way for reforms and revolutions, aimed at redistributing that wealth more equitably.
It sounds like a pattern that repeats itself over and over. And this probably leads them into the big debate. Socialism versus capitalism?
The Durants see the struggle between socialism and capitalism as another chapter in this ongoing cycle of wealth concentration and redistribution. They view capitalism as a powerful engine for innovation and wealth creation, but acknowledge its tendency to concentrate wealth in the hands of a few.
It's that age-old tension. You get incredible progress and efficiency, but often at the cost of growing inequality.
Precisely. And they see socialism as a reaction to the excesses and inequalities of capitalism. It attempts to level the playing field and ensure a more equitable distribution of resources. But the Durants are also clear-eyed about the challenges of socialism.
Like what? What are the potential downsides they highlight?
Well, they argue that socialism, while it aims for noble goals, often struggles with efficiency and can stifle individual initiative and creativity. It's that classic debate, individual freedom versus collective good.
And how do they see that debate playing out in the future? Do they think one system will ultimately triumph over the other?
Well, no. They actually predict that the future will likely see a convergence of capitalism and socialism, a blend that combines the dynamism and innovation of capitalism with the social safety net and concern for equality that are hallmarks of socialism.
Interesting. I can see how that's already happening to some extent
Yeah.
in many Western societies. Okay, so we've got these powerful economic and ideological forces shaping history. What about the role of government? Where did the Durants land on that?
They see government as a necessary evil, essential for maintaining order and security, but inherently prone to corruption and abuse of power. They highlight that famous paradox. We need government to protect us from chaos, but too much government can lead to tyranny. It's all about finding that delicate balance.
And they probably explore how different forms of government have tried to strike that balance throughout history. Right?
They do. They discuss monarchies, aristocracies, democracies, and everything in between. They're particularly interested in democracy. It's seen as the best system we've devised so far. But it's not without its flaws. They point out the inherent tension between liberty and equality in democratic systems.
It's a tough needle to thread. How much individual freedom are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of social justice and the common good?
Well, the Durants argue that the most effective form of government is one that provides equal access to education and opportunity, allowing talent and leadership to rise from all segments of society, regardless of background.
So it's about leveling the playing field, creating a system where everyone has a chance to succeed based on merit, not privilege. That's a powerful idea, but it's a lot harder to achieve in practice than it sounds right.
It is. It requires a commitment to social justice, a belief in the potential of all citizens, and a willingness to challenge entrenched systems of power and privilege.
It's a tall order, but it's something worth striving for. Okay, so we've covered geography, human nature, morality, religion, economics, and government. What other key themes do the Durants explore in the lessons of history? I know they talk about nationalism and its role in shaping history.
They do, and they're not overly optimistic about its influence. They see nationalism as a powerful, often dangerous force that has been repeatedly used throughout history to mobilize populations for conflict and war.
It's easy to see how nationalism can be manipulated, to stir up fear and hatred towards other groups. They probably contrast how nationalism is played out in different eras, right?
They do. They draw a sharp contrast between the limited nationalism of earlier eras and the total wars of the 20th century, highlighting the terrifying scale of destruction and civilian casualties that became possible with modern warfare.
It's a sobering reminder of how dangerous unchecked nationalism can be. especially when combined with advanced technology. Does this tie into their broader view of the cyclical nature of history?
It does. The Durants see a cyclical pattern in the rise and fall of civilizations. They identify common challenges that civilizations face, from environmental degradation to social inequality, political corruption, and moral decay.
It's almost like there's this inherent fragility to complex societies. They reach a certain peak, and then they start to decline.
Exactly. And they suggest that decline can take many forms. It could be a slow, gradual erosion of social cohesion and economic vitality. It could be a sudden collapse, triggered by war, famine, or disease. Or it could be a more subtle transformation, as civilizations migrate and rebuild in new locations, carrying their cultural heritage with them.
So they're not saying that history is just a straight line of progress. They see it as a much more complex and often cyclical process. Does this make them pessimistic about the future of civilization?
Not necessarily. They acknowledge the challenges we face, but also emphasize that we have agency. We're not just passive observers of history. We have the power to shape the course of events, for better or for worse. They remind us that history doesn't offer easy answers, but it does provide a wealth of knowledge and insights that can help us navigate the complexities of the present and make more informed choices about the future.
It's about recognizing patterns, understanding the forces that have shaped our world, and using that knowledge to build a better future. But where do we even begin? The scale of the challenges we face feels overwhelming.
Well, they suggest we start by asking ourselves some fundamental questions. Have we made genuine moral progress as a species? Or have we just shifted our prejudices? Are we truly masters of our fate? Or are we still slaves to our biology?
Those are big questions, the kind that have puzzled philosophers for centuries, and I'm guessing they don't offer simple solutions.
They don't, but they believe that grappling with these questions is essential. It's what makes us human, makes us think critically about our place in the world, and strive to be better.
It's about embracing the complexity of history and the human experience, not looking for easy answers, but for deeper understanding. And we can all do that. We don't need to be historians or philosophers to engage with these ideas.
Exactly. The Durants want to make history accessible to everyone. They believe that everyone can benefit from its lessons.
And The Lessons of History is a great place to start. It's a challenging book,
Yeah.
but it's incredibly rewarding.
It is. It's packed with insights and thought-provoking ideas that challenge you to see the world in new ways. We've talked a lot about the big, sweeping historical patterns the Durants identify, but I think one of the most fascinating aspects of the book is their discussion of human nature.
Yeah, they don't sugarcoat it. They present a pretty realistic, even somewhat cynical view of humanity.
Right. They argue that despite all of our advancements, we're still fundamentally driven by the same primal instincts for survival, power, and pleasure that have shaped our behavior since the dawn of time.
It's humbling to say the least. I remember that table they included, where they break down human character elements and compare them to animal instincts. It really makes you question how much we've truly evolved beyond our animal nature.
Right. Are we just better at disguising it, or have we actually transcended those primal urges? Through reason and compassion. I think that's one of the big questions that Durants want us to grapple with.
It's definitely food for thought, but they don't just present this bleak view of human nature. They also explore how these basic instincts can manifest in both positive and negative ways.
Exactly. For instance, they talk about how competition, while often seen as a destructive force, can also be a driver of progress and innovation. It pushes us to strive for excellence, to invent, to create new things.
Think about the incredible technological advancements we've seen in just the past century. A lot of that has been fueled by competition, whether between companies vying for market share or nations striving for dominance.
Precisely. And they also point out that cooperation often emerges as a strategy for competition. We form groups, families, tribes, nations, even corporations, to compete more effectively against other groups. It's that old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
It makes sense. Even if we have different goals and values, if we face a common threat, we're more likely to band together. But that also explains why things like nationalism and tribalism are so persistent throughout history. We're hardwired to see the world in terms of us versus them.
And that kind of thinking, as we know, can be incredibly dangerous. It can lead to prejudice, discrimination, violence, and war.
So where do we go from here? Are we just destined to keep repeating the mistakes of the past? Or can we break free from these cyclical patterns of conflict and decline?
Well, the Durants, while acknowledging the powerful forces at play, don't believe we're simply doomed. They suggest that through education, and a deeper understanding of history and human nature, we can learn to manage these primal instincts and create a more peaceful and just world.
It's about recognizing that we have agency, that we're not just passive passengers on this historical journey. We can make choices, individually and collectively, that shape the course of events.
The Durants want to empower us as readers and as citizens to engage with history actively, not just to learn about the past, but to use that knowledge to understand the present and create a better future.
And that's a powerful message. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that history isn't just something that happened to other people long ago. It's something we're all a part of, something we're all shaping right now.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the lessons of history, let's take that message to heart. Let's engage with history, learn from its patterns and its mistakes, and use those insights to build a more just, more peaceful, more sustainable future.
It's a challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, just remember what the Durants said about history, being a mix of guessing and prejudice. We're all just trying to make sense of this world, one step at a time.
Right. And even if we don't always get it right, the process of questioning, of learning, of striving for something better, that's what matters. That's what makes us human, and that's what gives us hope for the future.
Well said. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the lessons of history. We hope you found it as insightful and thought-provoking as we did.
And if you're ready to continue your exploration of history, we highly recommend checking out the full book. You can find a link to purchase it in the description below.
Don't forget to subscribe to Mindful Moments for more deep dives into fascinating books and ideas. And be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments. What resonated with you? What questions do you still have? We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep those minds nourished.